Welcome to Echo of Crime YouTube channel. The last confirmed moment anyone saw him was quiet and ordinary. It wasn't late at night, and there was no argument, no sudden panic, nothing that would later feel like a warning sign. He finished what he was doing, checked his phone once, and walked away. People nearby noticed him, but no one remembered anything unusual, because at the time, there was nothing unusual to remember. This was exactly how most disappearances begin, normal, calm, and easy to overlook. When he didn't return home that night, the concern was slow to build. At first, family members assumed there was a simple explanation. Maybe his phone battery died. Maybe he stayed with a friend. Maybe he decided to take a drive to clear his head. Hours passed, then morning came. Still no call. Still no message. His phone went straight to voicemail. That was when the situation shifted from inconvenience to fear. By mid-morning, his routine was clearly broken. He had not shown up where he was expected. His car was not where it should have been. Personal items he never left without were still behind. Family members began calling hospitals, friends, co-workers, anyone who might have seen or heard from him. No one had. Every answer sounded the same. "I thought he was with you." The police were contacted later that day. Officers arrived and asked the standard questions. When was he last seen? What was he wearing? Did he have problems with anyone? Was there stress at work or trouble at home? The answers didn't point anywhere specific. There were no known enemies, no recent threats, no history of disappearing before. To investigators, it looked like a low-risk missing person case, serious, but not urgent. They began with the basics. They checked his phone records and bank activity. They searched nearby areas he was known to visit. They spoke to neighbors and co-workers. Nothing stood out. No strange calls. No sudden withdrawals. No witnesses reporting screams, fights, or suspicious behavior. The early timeline ended cleanly, almost too cleanly, as if the person had simply stepped out of his life and vanished. Days passed. Flyers were shared. Social media posts spread his photo across local groups. Tips came in, but most led nowhere. People reported seeing someone who looked like him, but none could be confirmed. Each day, without answers, made the silence heavier. For the family, the worst part wasn't knowing what happened. It was not knowing anything. Inside the police department, the case stayed open but quiet. Without evidence of a crime, resources were limited. Officers continued to log tips and follow small leads, but there was no clear direction. It was still classified as a missing person investigation, not a criminal case. That classification mattered more than anyone realized. What no one knew at the time was that the disappearance had not gone unseen. Somewhere nearby, a camera had captured moments connected to his last movements. It wasn't dramatic footage. There were no flashing lights or obvious danger. Just ordinary images, recorded automatically, stored away, and ignored, because no one yet understood their importance. By the end of the first week, hope and fear existed side by side. The family believed he could still be alive. Investigators believed the case needed time. And the truth, the kind that changes everything, was already recorded, waiting patiently in a digital file that no one had checked. By the second week, the case began to slow down. The initial urgency had faded, replaced by routine check-ins and paperwork. Detectives reviewed the timeline again and again, hoping something they missed would suddenly make sense. But every path led back to the same problem. There was nothing solid to follow. No confirmed sightings. No evidence of a crime. Just a person who seemed to disappear into thin air. Then a small detail resurfaced. A family member mentioned a place he sometimes passed through on his way home. It wasn't important at first, just a normal area with shops, parking lots, and apartment buildings. But one detective decided to look closer. Instead of focusing on people, he focused on cameras. Not police cameras. Not traffic cameras. Private ones. The kind that record quietly and are rarely checked unless something goes wrong. Requests were sent out. Business owners were asked if they still had footage from that night. Some didn't. Others said their systems overwrite data after a few days. It seemed like another dead end. But one location replied differently. Their systems stored footage for longer than usual. Weeks longer. When investigators finally sat down to review the video, they didn't expect much. At first, the footage showed nothing special. Cars passing, people walking, shadows moving with the light. Then they saw him. The missing person appeared on screen, walking into frame at a time that matched the known timeline. He wasn't running. He wasn't calling for help. To anyone watching casually, it looked like an ordinary moment. But detectives don't watch casually. They watch closely. And something about his movement didn't feel right. He stopped. Not for long, but long enough to matter. He looked in a direction that didn't match where he was supposed to be going. His body turned slightly, as if responding to something off camera. Then another figure entered the frame. Not clearly, just enough to be noticed. This person didn't appear in any witness statements. No one had mentioned seeing anyone with him that night. The footage continued. The two figures stood near each other briefly. There was no clear sound, no obvious argument. Then they walked out of frame together, toward an area no one had previously searched. According to the official report, the missing person was last seen alone. The camera proved that was not true. Investigators paused the video, replayed it, slowed it down. Frame by frame, they studied details, clothing, posture, timing. They checked nearby cameras and found more angles. Each one added another piece to the puzzle. The missing person's route was not random. It was guided. What made the footage even more disturbing was what didn't happen. There was no footage of him leaving the area alone. No later appearance. No sign of him returning the way he came. According to the cameras, once he entered that space, he never came back out. The case status changed almost immediately. What had been treated as a missing person investigation was now something else entirely. Detectives began questioning earlier assumptions. They re-interviewed witnesses. They compared statements against the video timeline. Small inconsistencies appeared. Someone's memory didn't line up. Another person's account suddenly seemed incomplete. The footage had done something powerful. It had taken a quiet disappearance and given it direction. It showed that the truth hadn't vanished. It had been recorded, second by second, by a camera that never blinked. By the end of that day, investigators understood one thing clearly. This was never just a missing person case. And now that they had seen the footage, there was no turning back. Once the footage was confirmed, everything about the investigation changed. Detectives no longer asked where did he go. Instead, they asked who was with him and why. The unidentified figure from the video became the center of the case. Officers began working backward, tracing vehicles seen near the area, comparing clothing descriptions, and matching timestamps across multiple cameras. What had once been a quiet file now became one of the department's top priorities. As more surveillance was reviewed, a clearer picture formed. The missing person had not wandered off or gotten lost. The footage showed a pattern. Brief pauses, subtle direction changes, moments that suggested he was responding to someone else's actions. When investigators matched the video timeline with phone data, another detail stood out. His phone stopped transmitting shortly after he entered the area seen on camera. There were no outgoing messages, no calls, no movement afterward. The silence wasn't random. It had a precise starting point. Detectives identified a vehicle appearing repeatedly in nearby footage around the same time. It wasn't speeding. It wasn't acting suspiciously, at least not at first glance. That's what made it easy to miss. But once they tracked the license plate, the investigation accelerated. The owner had a connection to the missing person that had never been mentioned before. When questioned, their story didn't match what the cameras showed. Under pressure, small cracks appeared. Timelines shifted. Details changed. Investigators confronted the suspect with still frames from a footage. Images frozen in time, impossible to deny. What began as calm questioning turned into long pauses and unanswered questions. The camera had captured something the suspect didn't know existed, and it showed movements that directly contradicted their account. Eventually, the truth came out. The missing person had not disappeared on their own. The footage revealed a meeting that was never supposed to happen and a decision that led to consequences no one could undo. The cameras didn't show everything, but they showed enough. Enough to establish involvement. Enough to prove the disappearance was not voluntary. Enough to turn uncertainty into evidence. In real cases across the United States, moments like this have been the breaking point. Surveillance footage, often ignored for days or weeks, has exposed lies, revealed hidden relationships, and transformed missing person cases into criminal prosecutions. In this case, the camera did what memory could not. It preserved the truth exactly as it happened. For the family, the answers were painful, but answers nonetheless. The waiting was over. The questions had an ending. What once felt like an endless mystery finally had a name, a timeline, and accountability. They thought it was a missing person case. But the footage had been watching the entire time.